Okay, class. We're about to start on sections 1.15 and 1.16. For section 1.15 is page 148 to 151, problems 1 through 21 odd. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over maybe about 4 problems from this section. And if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to email me or ask those questions during our live synchronous sessions. So I'm going to start with problem number 7. It says solve exercises 7 through 14 graphically and algebraically. So with problem number 7, let me do this real quick. 1 second. Okay, with problem number 7, we have the inequality 3x is greater than -6. Now to graph this algebraic, or to graph this, we're going to set each side of the inequalities equal to y. So we have y equals 3x and y is equal to -6. Okay, now after we set these two equations here, we're going to solve the inequality. We're going to divide each side by 3. Okay, so now we divided each side by 3, and we have x is greater than -2. Okay, so now we have x is greater than -2. So now we're going to do some graphing. First, we're going to use Desmos, and we will type in y is equal to 3x, and that gives us this line. Let me expand this out a little bit. And then we will have y is equal to -6. Now, if you notice, it gives us this second line as well, and we see our intersection point. Now, our intersection point of these two lines, the solution for these two lines would be -2, -6. However, we have this inequality here of x is greater than -2. So we have to graph this. Now I'm going to show you how this graph is supposed to look according to how your book wants it. Now, I will admit I would not have graphed this on a coordinate plane. I just would have did a number line and called it a day, because a number line would have graphed the x is greater than -2. But for some reason, they want you to be able to graph both lines and also the inequality. So now, I'm going to take this first equation with the y equals 3x. I'm going to make that 0. So this will be 0, 0. And then also I could do -2 and then -6. Then I could draw a line here. -2, -6. All right, so that's the first line. The second line is y equals -6, which would be here. And we would just go and connect where they connect at the -2, -6. But then to do the inequality, you have to go where x is -2, which is here. Put an open circle, and since x is greater than 2, you have to draw the line going to the right, and that's it. So basically we have our number line for the inequality, and then we graph both of these lines. Okay, now I want to move on to problem number, let's do problem number 11. Problem number 11. We have 8 minus x is greater than or equal to 5 times 8 minus x. Just like we did in problem number 7, we will have y equals to the left side of the inequality and y equals to the right side of the inequality. And then here we will go off to the side and then solve the inequality. So this would be 8 minus x is greater than or equal to. using the distributive property, we have 40 minus 5x. We can add 5x on both sides. And we have 8 plus 4x is greater than or equal to 40. Subtract 8 on both sides. 4x is greater than or equal to 32. And divide each side by 4. And x is greater than or equal to 8. Okay, so now we know that x is greater than or equal to 8. And then we come over here and we can actually graph this using Desmos. Y equals 8 minus x. And then we have y is equal to 5 parenthesis 8 minus x. And then we will close our parenthesis. Now if we look here, our intersection point is at 8, 0. All right. So basically, we're going to graph this. We're going to do our own little number line here. And you all have this graph already in your textbook. So it should be a lot easier to graph than you having to draw a graph. So now, if you notice here, we could take both of these and I could do 8, 0, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That'll be 1 point. And then I can make x 0 and then y would be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, that'll be one graph. And then down here, we could just basically do the same thing. If we put in 8 for x, then it will be 0, 8, 0. And then we could put in, let's just do 7 for x. So then that'll be 7, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we can graph this. Okay, so we have our intersection point. Now the next thing, we had 8 is greater than or equal to 8. So we would have a closed circle here, and we would draw our graph going to the right with its own arrowhead. And so that's problem number 11. Now, I'm going to do 2 more problems from this section. Problem 15, and then also problem 21. So problem 15, we have 1 is less than 3x minus 2 is less than 4. And it says solve exercises 15 and 16 algebraically. So all we have to do now is just solve this using algebra. Now, it's 3 sides to this inequality. So remember, the golden rule of algebra is what you do to one side, you would do to another. But when you have an inequality where there's 3 sides, what you do to one side, you do to all sides. So here, you always try and have a variable in the middle. We would add 2 to all 3 sides. So we add 3 is less than 3x, which is less than 6. We divide all 3 values by 3, and we add 1 is less than x, which is less than 2. And that is the final answer for 15. Now we go over to 21. It says the temperature readings in the United States have ranged from a record low of a negative 79.8 degrees Fahrenheit, Alaska, January 23, 1971, to a record high of 134 degrees Fahrenheit, California, July 10, 1913. If F represents the Fahrenheit temperature, write a compound inequality that represents the interval of temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit in the United States. Okay, so for 21A, first of all, we know that F will go in the center. because that's the Fahrenheit. And then we would know that it would be less than or equal to on both sides. On the left-hand side, we will put the lowest temperature, which was a negative 79.8. Matter of fact, let me make myself enough room here. So we have a negative 79.8. And then on the right side, we will have that high temperature, which was 134. So this is the compound inequality they're looking for. Okay, now B. It says, recall that Fahrenheit and Celsius temperatures are related by the formula. F is equal to 1.8 times C plus 32. Rewrite the compound inequality in part A to determine the temperature range in degrees Celsius. All right. Now 21B is basically a substitution problem. We know we had negative 79.8, which is less than or equal to, which is less than or equal to 134. Now what's going to change is the F in the middle, because it's told to us in B on problem 21 that F is equal to 1.8 Celsius plus 32. So this would be the inequality rewritten based upon Celsius. Now with C, they asked us to solve this. So we have negative 79.8 is less than or equal to 1.8 Celsius plus 32 is less than or equal to 134. So now we do it just like we did problem 15. Compound inequality, we do everything to each side. So we'll subtract 32 on each side. So this right here would be a negative 111.8 is less than or equal to 1.8 Celsius, which is less than or equal to 102. Now we divide each side by 1.8. This would be less than or equal to, so this would be C in the center. 102 divided by 1.8 is 56.7, and 111.8 divided by 1.8 would be a negative 62.1. And that is the final answer for C. And that is basically it from 1.15. Now we're going to go over here to 1.16. Now let me get the actual problems. 1.16 would be page 158 to 162, 135, and 6. Let me clear this out. All right, so 135 and 6. All right, so what I'm going to do problem number 3 and problem number 5, and then we will be done. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions. Now, number 3 is on page 1, at the bottom of page 159. That's where it starts. It says, you are an author about to publish your first novel, Hockey Today. The book will sell for $25. You will be paid royalties of 10% on the first 15,000 copies sold, 12% on the next 6,000 copies, and 16% on any additional copies. Now it says, write a piecewise function F that specifies the total royalties if X copies are sold. Now, if you notice, they give you 3 different scenarios. So you're going to have 3 different piecewise functions. The first scenario they tell you is that the book is selling for $25 and you will get royalties of 10%. Now we know 10% of 25 is 2.5. But then in order for us to know how much you would get, we would need the amount of books sold, which would be X, because it tells us X is the copy sold. All right, now, we have to put a rule with this 2.5x. So x must be less than or equal to 15,000 copies. As they said, you would make 10% royalties up to 15,000 copies. So that'll be from 0 to 15,000. Okay, so that took care of the first value. Now we're told here that you'll get 12% on the next 6,000 copies, and then 16% on any additional copies. Okay, so with that being said, we have to figure out what this next formula is. All right, so we would have 37,500 plus 3 times x minus 15,000, and that would be for 15,000 where x is greater than 15,000 but less than or equal to 21,000. Now let me explain the equation and then also the rule. Okay, now 37,500 is what you would make here. If you put 15,000 times 2.5, that would be $37,500. So when you get into that 12% for the 6,000 copies, you would be to have 37,500 plus the extra 12%. Now we have to figure out what the 12% is giving us. Okay, now if you notice here, we got x minus 15,000 copies. So with that being said, okay, class, we made $37,500 from the sale from the first 15,000 copies. This 3 that's outside this parenthesis actually came from the fact of we're going to make 12%. We're going to make 12% of $25. So if you take 25 times 12%, that gives you 3. That's where we got the 3 from. And then we're going to take the number of copies sold minus 15,000, which would give us our 6,000 that was stated. That is why we have 15,000. X is greater than 15,000, but it goes up to the 21,000. We're not going to get 12% of 21,000 copies. It'll be 12% of 6,000. So that's why we added 21,000 minus the 15,000. Okay, now we go to the last piecewise function. Now we have to find out the max amount that we would get here, which would be $55,500. That is the max amount that we would get here. But we're told that we would get 16% on additional copies. So if you did 16% of $25, that would give you 4. So it'd be plus 4 times x minus the most amount of copies that you sold previously was 21,000. So it's x minus 21,000. And then the rule is anything over 21,000 would be at this rate here. Okay, now B. It says use your function from part A to determine whether the royalty is $46,500 when 18,000 books are sold. Is the royalty $71,500 when 25,000 copies are sold? If you do not obtain these answers when substituting into the function, then discover where you went wrong. Excuse me. All right. Do 3B. All right, so it said that you sold 18,000 books. Well, we know for the first 15,000, we'll take 2.5 5 times 15,000, because that's one of our rules, which is the 37.5. And then we would add 3 times what's left after the 18,000 would be 3,000 copies. So now 2.5 times 15,000 is 37,500 plus 9,000. When we add these two together, it gives us 46,500. So that means that our piecewise function worked for the 18,000 books sold. Now the 25,000 copies sold. Now what we could do is go straight to the third function, because remember, with the 25,000 copies sold, the second function only goes up to 21,000 copies. And remember, when we got this value here, this 55,500, that included the first two pieces. So all of these added together and pieced together would give us 55,500. So we would take the 55,500 and we would add 4 times. Now the amount of books sold was, what was it, 25,000 minus 21,000, and then we could solve it. 55,500 plus 25,000 minus 21,000 is 4,000. So it'd be 4 times 4,000. So it'd be 55,500 plus 16,000. So when you add those two together, that will give you $71,500. Okay, now C. Okay, C, it says, with the royalties from your book you would like to pay for your advanced degree in journalism, it will cost $65,000. How many books must sell to cover the cost of the degree? So, since you want to do 65,000, and we know that the first two formulas only equal up to 55,500, that means that you would have to use the latter formula, the last formula, which was the $55,500 plus 4 times x minus 21,000. Now you're going to set this equal to the $65,000 you need for your college tuition. So we would take care of this side first. Let's do the distributive property. It'll be 4x minus 84,000. So now 55,500 minus 84,000 is actually a negative 28,500. Now we would add the 28,500, and this would be 93,500 is equal to 4x. Divide each side by 4, and it'll be 23,375 is equal to x. So you need 23,375 books sold. Okay. Our next problem, which will actually be our last problem, is actually problem number 5. Okay, problem number 5. It says complete the following table where f of x is equal to the absolute value of x minus 3 and g of x is equal to the absolute value of x plus 3. All right, so the table. So we have f of x, and g of x. All right, so we have -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is a lot of numbers here. All right. So the formula, let me write the formulas down here. F of x is equal to the absolute value of x minus 3. And then g of x is equal to the absolute value of x plus 3. Now, if we substitute in -5, this will give us -8, which will give us +8. We substitute in -5 here, this will give us -2, which is +2. And then as we substitute in all of these values, we will get these values here. This will be 7, this will be 1, this will be 9, this will be 0. Oh, I'm sorry, 6, not 9. I multiplied. This will be 6, this will be 0, this will be 5, this would be 1, this would be 4, this would be 2, and then this 0 would be 3 and 3, 1 would be 2 and 4, 2 would be 1 and 5, 3 would be 0 and 6, and then 4 would be 1 and 7, and then 5 would be 2 and 8. All right. It says B. It says sketch a graph of each of the functions f and g. Verify using your graphing calculator. Okay, listen. We're just going to use the graphing calculator here because I'm pretty sure that you all know how to graph points. So you can graph the points inside of your textbook. But if you had trouble graphing the points, please let me know and then I will go over that with you. But let's graph this. Now we know f of x and g of x is the same thing as saying y. So we would say y is equal to, now we need the absolute value of, what's that, x minus 3. So this is the absolute value of x minus 3. You see that it forms a V shape. Matter of fact, let me do this here. It forms a V shape. Next, we will have y is equal to the absolute value of x plus 3. And as you see, there's a different V here. And I like the fact that Desmos uses different colors. So if you see here, the first graph was the green, and the second graph was the purple. And their intersection point is at 0, 3. So this is basically how you would graph it. Okay, now for C, it says describe how the graphs of f and g can be obtained from the graph of y equals absolute value of x. Now, first of all, f is the same as y equals the absolute value of x. Only it shifted 3 units. Now, I'm going to show you this. First thing, well, I should say where it shifted 3 units to the right. All right, so first thing I want to do is turn off the purple graph. Let me turn it off so we would just deal with the first graph, which is your f of x. Now let me type in y equals the absolute value of just x. And I want you to watch this. Okay, now y equals the absolute value of x. You notice that it hits the origin. So if you notice here, the only difference between these two is that this shifted over 3. It's the same exact graph. It's just that the f of x, which we have here is y equals absolute value x minus 3. This went over 3 places on the x-axis. So this right here is the actual statement. Now, let's take a look. Since we have this graph here, let's bring the purple back. If you notice here with the purple, it just went 3 to the left. So we could say that G is the same as y equals the absolute value of x, only it shifted 3 units to the left. That's the only difference. Now we go here to D. It says write f of x is equal to the absolute value of x minus 3 as a piecewise function. So let's take a look here. We notice here we basically got two sides here to, let me see, is that they wanted the x minus 3. Okay. We got two sides here. Let me put this point here. We got two sides here to the graph of the absolute value of x minus 3. So with our piecewise function, the first part will be negative x plus 3, and the second part will be x minus 3. And we have to put an if statement here. This would be if x is less than or equal to 3 or x is greater than 3. Now, if you look here, this is the minimum point that they have for this graph as far as the lowest, well, I would say the lowest y value. But if you look here, if you go to the left of this here, anything less than 3, you notice it has its own line. Anything greater than 3 has its own line here. So you basically have both of these lines meeting when x is equal to 3. So if you look here, when x is less than or equal to 3, so when x is less than or equal to 3, that would encompass 0 and all of these other values here to the left. But if x is greater than 3, it does not encompass when y is equal to 0. So that would be technically an open circle, but since we already have the closed circle from the first piece of the piecewise function, we will leave it as a closed circle. And then it would include all of the values to the right when x is greater than 3. Now, E, it says, what is the domain of f of x? What is the domain of g of x? Basically, there's no restrictions on f of x or g of x. The x values, it includes all of the x values. So we could say f of x and g of x are all real numbers for their domain. Now the last part, they ask us, what is the range? Now if you notice, the range here, the range is the y value. The lowest y value you have for both of these is 0. So the ranges for f of x and g of x is y is greater than or equal to 0. So it doesn't go lower, so we couldn't say all real numbers because real numbers also include negative numbers. But y, the lowest it goes is 0, and then it goes to all the other numbers as 0 or greater. So that's why we got y is greater than or equal to 0. So now, we are done with both of these sections. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact me and I will gladly answer your questions. Have a great day.